Welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Bob Murphy. I'm the Director of Business Development here at Datamark. And I want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon for our presentation. Hopefully everybody's in the right room. Our presentation for this hour is the Northern Colorado wildfires and the use of GIS data in emergency evacuation orders. I'm honored to be here with Kimberly Culp, who's the current Chief Executive Officer with the Larimer Emergency Telephone Authority. She's been in public safety, holding numerous positions for 28 years and has been employed with LETA for the past 15 years. Ms. Culp serves on various statewide 911 committees in Colorado and is the current chair of Colorado NG911 EdgeNet Users Group. So hopefully everybody's in the right room, and I will moderate today's session. And before we begin, I'd like to let everybody know that we are recording this session. All attendees have been muted for quality assurance purposes. We do highly encourage questions through the use of the chat or the Q&A feature within the Zoom platform here. And it's our plan to share and entertain the questions at the conclusion of the presentation. But again, feel free along the way interactively to go ahead and pose those questions through the chat feature, through the Q&A, and we'll compile those and either answer them live if we can silently, or again, bring them to the end. So that being said, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce and turn the floor over to Kimberly.
Great, thank you. And I just want to confirm that you can see my screen, that I'm showing it correctly. Okay, got a confirmation, good to go. All right, as already introduced, I'm Kimberly Culp, Chief Executive Officer for Larimer Emergency Telephone Authority. We go by LETA or LETA 911. And I have worked in emergency services for 28 years. And my goal today is to discuss how we prepared our GIS data and used our GIS data and mapping tools during the Colorado wildfires that impacted Larimer County in 2020. So a little bit about LETA. So in 911 Colorado, we oversee the administration of 911, which includes the 911 network, call routing, programs, equipment associated with delivering the 911 service. We were formed through an IGA with 25 government partners, and the population we have in Larimer County is 350,000. We're also home to Colorado State University, which is roughly 35,000 students and faculty. And we also have an average of 4.1 million tourists that visit Estes Park and Rocky Mountain National Park. We do have 5 911 public safety answering points, also known as dispatch centers or emergency operations. So for Larimer County, our boundary is complex. So I have it outlined here on a map so you know where we are in Colorado. So the dark outline there is our jurisdictional boundary. And we have a complex geographic area where we have our plains area that supports agriculture in the gas and oil industry. We have the national park, forest land, the urban corridor, and also Colorado State University, so a large university in our response area. Which means with all that geographic diversity, we are subject to some disasters. So a noteworthy fact that's just a fact, it's not something that we're incredibly proud of. We've had the most federally declared disasters in Colorado in Larimer County. The hazards have included fires, floods, severe weather, tornadoes, and blizzards. This just means that we've had experience of learning what didn't work. And sometimes those are the best lessons to learn, is to give it a try and to determine what hasn't worked well so you can make those adjustments moving forward. Our tornado that really impacted Larimer County was a mile-wide tornado that ripped through Windsor, Colorado. From the floods, you probably heard about them in 2013, where they went through our canyon, the Big Thompson Canyon, and flooded numerous areas, population, and did take a couple of lives lost. Some of our fires in 2013, known as the High Park Fire, that was an incredibly large, disastrous fire, also took a life, and then our fires in 2020 that I'll dive into. And I'm not trying to deter you from visiting lovely Colorado and Larimer County. I just, when you come here, just be prepared for anything because you don't know what's gonna hit you. Okay, so I want to spend just a little bit of time here talking about our emergency alert system, because really the emergency alert system is the foundation that is really important to understand how we used our GIS. So emergency alert systems have evolved over the years, very similar to GIS and 911. Emergency alert tools used to be like a spoke of the wheel. So they were just something to consider at some part of an emergency. And over time, at least in Larimer County, emergency alert tools really have become the hub of the wheel. These tools are front and center in all pre-planning that we do. They are front and center in small localized events, and as we witnessed this last summer, fall, in very large scale complex events as well. So the way we consider our emergency alert tools is very similar to how GIS has evolved over the years in 911. So with all of my tenure in 911, GIS used to be something that was not really even in dispatch centers. I hate to admit the fact that I started in 911 when there were still cards that we would write down and time and then send them on a little belt down to the other side of the room. So GIS has evolved, whether it evolved with phase 1 wireless, and then it continued to evolve with phase 2 wireless, where mapping was front and center. And now states are working on migrating to spatial call routing. And with spatial call routing, GIS is truly that hub of 911. And that's the philosophy that we have adopted in Larimer County. The tools that we use for emergency alerts, and that's what's displayed here on your screen, these are all the tools that we have deployed for emergency alerts and emergency notifications in Larimer County. So we really consider this a multi-layered approach. We understand and know that citizens aren't always going to want to have a relationship with us and give us all of their data. And we also understand we have infrastructure challenges. And with infrastructure challenges, it's up to us to decide what tools we need in those particular areas. So our emergency alert system is here on the blue side. I did keep it vendor agnostic, so I'm not going to discuss about any vendor specific plugs here on who we use, but our system up here is the blue overarching system, and that's our gateway to do everything else for our emergency alerts. We have what we would start with our social media piece, and our social media, we can push our emergency alerts out to our social media platforms. Since we were formed off of an IGA, intergovernmental agreement with 25 partners, we can push alerts out to our social media partner channels, so their Facebook, their websites, along with ours. And that allows us to reach citizens that may follow the sheriff, but maybe not follow us specifically. So social media is an incredibly powerful tool for our emergency alerts. We also have a keyword, which whenever we have a disaster, an event, maybe something we need to communicate to our citizens about, we have a keyword. And the keyword that we have established could be for overall arching emergencies, or we can also make it event specific. So it allows citizens to quickly text a keyword and get signed up for emergency alerts, not geographic based, but really focused on that event or that keyword type. Our weather alerts get pushed out through our emergency alert system automatically. And then the pieces that are really tied to GIS have to do with our citizens signing up to receive emergency alerts and volunteering to create an account and add in their information, their cell phones, their emails, signing up for text alerts, and also our 911 database. And so that is our 911 database that we will take and add that into our emergency alert system. Our emergency alert system also has an interface with iPause, and with the iPause allows us to use our emergency alert system to push that out through the iPause and then send it out to all the different tools that are with the iPause. So when an emergency alert is requested, what we determine and we work with our partners on is deciding what tool is the right tool for emergency alerts based on the situation. For example, a barricaded gunman, we would use the 911 database, and we would use the citizen opt-in, and we would order a shelter in place. And that shelter in place would be geographically based, and it would focus on a target area, and it would tell them what action they need to take in that area. For a large scale wildfire moving quickly, perhaps evacuations being ordered at 2 a.m., we're throwing every tool we have at the alert to generate a quick response. We don't care if we annoy our citizens at that point. If we can wake you up and give you clear instructions to save your life, we're going to call you multiple times. So this is our emergency alert system that we have deployed in Larimer County. Point-based address map in Larimer County, and this is really where we focus on the role of GIS. So the role of GIS for our 911 database and our citizen opt-ins, that's the portion where we target alerts. So from targeting alerts, that's where we want to identify an area under threat, and we need to target the notification to that specific area. So we will receive our 911 database on a monthly basis, and we load that into the emergency alert system. And historically, the emergency alert system tools would geocode that data using a commercial geocoder. And the geocoder would focus on Centerline data. Centerline data is somewhat problematic, and that is a lesson learned, a historical lesson we learned, and I'll talk about that a little bit. The citizens creating an account, if we can get them to agree to create an account and add their data in the system, they would create an account, add their address, and that address would be geocoded on a commercial geocoder. So Centerline geocoding, if the address is at 500 Main Street, it's going to look for the Centerline and place the address on the Centerline. So 500 Main Street would be roughly right here around 5th Street there. And if the address was 100 to 1000 Main Street, it would roughly place that dot on 500 Main. So that's okay in a situation where you have an urban area and you have blocks and streets equally distanced, follow a evenly numbered block structure. Centerline geocoding is probably okay. I'm not going to say it's ideal, but you're probably not going to see a lot of error. So this would be approximately where that 500 Main Street would be placed. Centerline geocoding in an area, and this is a map snapshot of a long county road in our county, and this road happens to be called Glade Road, and if the road ranges from 100 to 1000, it would roughly place 500 in the middle of the road. So it would look and say, this is maybe where 500 Glade Road would be located. And in reality, 500 Glade Road should be up here at the north side of the street. So if I was to do an evacuation order and I needed to evacuate all addresses up in this area, it would miss that address of 500 Glade Road because the Centerline geocoding actually places it down here, when in reality, it should have been geocoded up there. So the location of the address is not valid, and we found that through our emergency alerts and historically when we had large-scale wildfires, and we found out that it is just not close enough to guess and do Centerline geocoding. So imminent threat to life, close is not good enough, which caused us to really rethink how we were doing our geocoding for our emergency alert system. We decided we needed to do business better and improve our processes. Imminent threat to events, close enough wasn't something that we could justify. So we needed to be exact. And I know exact is a hard word to say, and it's a really tricky goal. But to be exact, we needed to change our model and create a point-based address layer for Larimer County. So we hired a dedicated GIS analyst to prepare our data. And the point-based address layer is used in our 911 data. It's being used to prepare for spatial call routing in the future when we get there in Colorado. And it's also used in our computer-aided dispatch system. And it truly is now the foundation for our emergency alert system. So now when we need to find an address to notify for evacuations, we'll see the address point and it'll be a dot on top of the structure. So a couple of maps here. If we were to search for this particular park or area or these addresses in our emergency alert system, we actually can see the exact address on that point, and we'll see the points in the map, and it will take us exactly to the location of that structure. So we made the changes as I stated, we hired a dedicated person to focus on our objective and our goal to try and get close is not enough and to get exact in our GIS data. And we made all those changes in our emergency alert system, lessons learned when we were sending out polygon evacuations, and people were saying, why didn't I get notified? I should have been. That caused us to relook and evaluate that accuracy of the GIS data. So we folded in that point-based address map, point-based address geocoding, and we took all those processes and we took them internally. So we would do it internally and then load that data in our emergency alert system. So we felt really good about solving one of the problems we experienced over the years in some of our disasters on just accuracy on notifying citizens in emergency alerts. But then there was another theme that we continued to experience. In the theme, questions from citizens and the concerns that they would raise to us in emergency events. And the questions they would say is, where's the emergency? They wanted to know exactly where the fire was at or exactly what was impacted by the floods. And then they always have that next question. Am I impacted? Is my family impacted? Are my friends impacted? Is my favorite place that I like to go and hike and snowshoe and hunt, is that impacted? And then the follow-up questions were constantly, now what was the message? I didn't quite get the message. I don't understand the message. I want to hear the message again. Tell me exactly what am I supposed to do? So we would take the emergency alert, we send it out, we identify areas, and that just wasn't enough for our citizens. They wanted more. And then the ongoing status of what's the status of the event and when can I go home if they've been evacuated? And then again, where's that emergency? Am I going to have to leave? So we felt great about our data. We felt great about our processes. But in late 2019, we had a series of smaller wildfires, and all of these questions from the citizens were hit to us in citizen community conversations. And we didn't have great answers of how can we really fix this for our citizens and make sure they know and that they're informed about emergency events. So we started to just really think about how to solve this problem and try to fix that dynamic with our citizens. And I don't know if I have anybody on today from Los Angeles, but they probably don't even know I was stalking them. And I was stalking them for a while. So huge shout out to LA Fire. I was planning a vacation in 2019 and I had rented a vacation rental and they had a series of fires in late summer, early fall of 2019. And so I'm thinking about, do I travel? Do I go there? Should I cancel my reservation? And I found an amazing map that identified areas of evacuation that were impacted from their fires. So they would post their urban and wildfires, and I was able to search from Colorado to know if I should go to the area. So we took this concept that LA did, and we just decided to supersize it a bit. And this is a picture of the map that they had. I just grabbed this to showcase a little bit of what they were doing way ahead of what we did. But again, we took it and we took their idea and we formed our big new launch of NoCo Alert. So our central website was born in early 2020. So we started working on it at the end of 2019 to go live in 2020. And the goal of this website was to be a central landing point for all of our partners. Again, 25 partners. I already discussed the large amount of citizens we have to support in addition to that 4.1 million tourist population. And we needed a place that everybody could drive to say, what is the status of emergencies in Larimer County? We also knew it had to be all about the map. So had to be map focused, map on the front page, had to be accurate, easy to use, familiar to the citizens. We needed to clearly identify the area impacted, a way to display the message that we sent out, and have search tools. So citizens could say, here's the emergency, and this is the address where I'm at. What's the distance look like? Should I start to prepare? What's going on that impacts me? So due to COVID, we did a soft launch in March of 2020. We know that our population was incredibly inundated with everything else with the health orders. So we went live with NoCoAlert, but we didn't do a huge public messaging campaign, just didn't want that influx of overwhelm messaging to our citizens. So we launched in March of 2013, and then fast forward a couple of months, and we experienced some pretty amazing events starting in August. So in August 13, we started a series of wildfires. The first wildfire in Larimer County started that afternoon, August 13, and it is known as the Cameron Peak Fire. And if you can see where my mouse is, I'm kind of highlighting over where the Cameron Peak Fire was. Cameron Peak Fire burned from August 13th until December 2nd. So fires, they don't tend to behave, and it's not like they go one and then the other, then the other. These fires decided to all overlap each other. So while we were dealing with the fast growing up and downs of Cameron Peak Fire, on August 23rd, we had another fire that started, which is the Bluestone Fire. You can't see it on this map very well, but we had Bluestone Fire, and with the high winds and pushing Bluestone into Cameron, we were doing evacuations from both fires at the same time. On September 17th, Mullen Fire started up in Wyoming, and as you can see, that fire decided to push south into our neighboring county and created evacuations up in northern Colorado. So residents were being evacuated from Cameron Peak and Mullen Fire, and when Mullen Fire started its evacuation orders is when we implemented kind of that wide, broad approach of our emergency alert system, and we sent out our IPAWS alerts for that wider net. And because it just wasn't fun enough to have those fires, Calwood Fire, which is down here in our neighboring county of Boulder County, broke out on October 17th. That fire started to push north and caused pre-evacuation orders to be placed on our citizens in Larimer County up in this area. So at this point, citizens were being evacuated from Cameron Peak, from Mullen pushing south, and also from Calwood pushing north. So just as we were trying to get our arms around everything going on, East Troublesome Fire broke out on October 14th in Grant County. But on October 22nd, it jumped the Continental Divide, which all of us are still scratching our heads, how in the world that happened. Jumped the Continental Divide, started to make a huge run through Rocky Mountain National Park and pushed down into our county and started to threaten our town of Estes Park. So we were evacuating residents at that time from East Troublesome Fire and actively from Cameron Peak Fire that was still pushing into our communities, into Fort Collins, down into Drake, Glen Haven, and Estes Park. So a lot of our communities felt very sandwiched and terrified that they weren't going to have an evacuation route out of their communities. Our fires crossed 3 counties and 1 state. So coordination, communication, succinct messaging was all critical. The other piece I just want to mention is sheltering for evacuees during COVID. That was a huge challenge, and it was, we weren't going to do large scale sheltering, so everybody was sheltered in their own hotel rooms. We ran out of place for large and small animal sheltering, and we had to send people hours away to shelter them. So a shout out to Red Cross. They were the huge heroes in this event, managing housing for all of our displaced residents. So this is our front page, our homepage of our NoCoAlert website. And from August to November, we had 13.5 million visits. So needless to say, we got to test drive our new tool, and we had no idea how useful this tool would become. We knew GIS was essential to our citizens just based on all of those questions we'd received about emergency alerts, but we never anticipated how many internal and external partners would turn to the tool for the information. The tool, the NoCoAlert tool, was heavily used by our PIOs, by our local and national news outlets. It was also up and displayed in our 5 911 centers because as citizens would call them and ask questions, they could visually do the search, help the citizens out, and also see what the status of the evacuations were. And it was also used by our state and federal partners. So they were referencing it, using it, building their maps off of everything that we were putting into that NoCoAlert webpage. So my next screen gets a little bit busy. So bear with me on this as I explain it a little bit. So on the left side, this is a snapshot of everything that was dumped into our map at one time. Now, it was definitely cleaned up as our event unfolded. So from this perspective, we would put in all of the closed roads. So you can imagine all these fires, all the evacuations. We had a lot of access points that were closed, especially our roads. So we would add that information into our NoCo Alert map to allow citizens to see roads that they could use for their planning into the area. We also had up here this search bar where citizens could search for their address. So they could search to then have their address brought up on a map and see where they were in relation to the emergency events. This black dark layer, these are all of the outlines and footprints of where the fire was burning. Eventually we grew to this blue layer around the edges, and that is the containment layer. So that allowed us to show and demonstrate to the citizens where containment lines were at, which was really needed after months and months of fire growth. We also placed on there the boundary of the emergency evacuation orders. So the order would be placed on the map, the area that was being evacuated. And when citizens clicked on that, you can see over a little bit on this next screen on the right side, when citizens would click on that little shape, then it would read what that evacuation order was. Citizens could click on the map of the burn area and know the name of the fire that they were looking at. And they could also click on any of the red roads and the name of the road would populate. So they could see which road was closed visually, but then also read that information from looking at the map. So this again became really the center of everything that we were doing during the fires. We would use our emergency alert tools to communicate with our citizens. So we would draw the area, the polygons on our emergency alert system tools, send the emergency alert system notification with all the language, the action they needed to take. And then we would take that information and we would populate it on our NoCo Alert map. And the NoCo Alert map would display that and be the central place where citizens could access, have a look and feel that was familiar with them because we used a Google Map platform. And they would be able to search and see all the critical landmarks in our county. I'm just going to click through a couple of photos here. This photo was taken in Estes Park when fires were pushing from Cameron Peak, and then when it dropped over from East Troublesome. And then this next photo is really terrifying. This was on October 24th at 9:34 in the morning. This is how it looked in Estes Park. You can see all the cars lined up trying to evacuate and get out of town. And it was so incredibly dark and red. We had no idea what to expect. This is a photo of Fort Collins Loveland Airport on one of the days that the fire took a huge run. So again, the fire first started on August 13th. Evacuations were lifted. All evacuations in Larimer County were lifted on November 2nd. And the fires were 100% contained on December 2nd. So quite the long event. So point-based address map, absolutely critical. Being able to be accurate with our messaging was a huge change that we made after lessons learned. So Centerline wasn't enough. We needed to make sure that we were absolutely 100% accurate and on top of that address when we wanted to send emergency alerts. This photo on the left is from the city of Loveland as the fire burned over a ridge and we had to start making preparations for the potential of the fire moving into city and how we would quickly mobilize those citizens. So without that dedicated focused GIS work, that was an ongoing process and will continue to be an ongoing process. Point-based address map isn't one and done. It is something that is being touched all the time as especially our communities grow. It really helped us feel that we were fixing our issue and an imminent threat to life. We knew that GIS needed to be exact. Our NoCo Alert map improved our communication to the citizens, and it allowed our citizens to check for updates, to re-review the information, and we believe that the NoCo Alert map really improved life safety. The GIS component focus of the effort helped reinforce that hub concept of the wheel and really made it the center of everything we do. That plus our 911 emergency alert system really became a strong hub for everything else that flowed from those two systems. The data management and sharing of the 911 data and all of the map layers that we were creating allowed consistency. And when you're working an event, when you have federal agencies, state agencies, and all the different local resources working together, it has to be consistent. Our citizens needed consistent messaging, consistent information. If we're going to say a fire is contained and what area is contained, we all need to be speaking the same language and have the same message. Same thing if we were doing an evacuation order of a particular area, we knew what the evacuation order was, and our partners needed to see the area and know what the message is. So if a citizen called the federal agency, they knew exactly what was going on and could help direct the citizens as well. So how did the incident end? So 0 lives lost. All of these fires, quick moving fires, evacuations at 2 a.m. And we were able to say, and we're very proud to be able to say we had 0 lives lost. We had 13 million views on that NoCo Alert website. We ended up sending out 276 emergency evacuation orders. And we handled in our information center 22,562 text requests. And so we allow through our different websites for citizens to text us and ask us questions about how can they sign up for emergency alerts. And we handled over 22,000 of those during the event. We're always looking to close gaps and improve our processes. And we know that we have to work together to do the right thing. And really what helped the event fall or stop was snow falling. So on October 25th, 18 inches of snow fell and finally stopped the fire from growing, and firefighters were able to obtain containment. So without the snow, I'm not sure. It was such a dry summer and fall. I have no idea how much longer the fire would continue to burn. On the fire on September 8th, we had 8 to 14 inches, just depending on where it was at on the fire. And the fire continued to burn even with that much moisture in September. So we weren't sure what was going to happen in October. So that 18 inches really helped dampen everything and just help the fire be contained, and eventually it was closed out. So what we're doing right now is we're looking on how we can continue to close gaps. So for us, we're always evaluating, hey, this was good, what can we do better? This worked well, this didn't. And that's where we really feel that we were able to have a successful event this fall with these various fires. And so that's what we're doing now. We're shifting gears saying, okay, what do we need to change to get ready for the next, whatever it may be? Right now, we know that we're going to have flooding in that fire scar. So we're preparing for our spring runoff and increased flooding due to that damaged area and such a large area. And we know the impact to our watershed. But the one thing that hasn't and won't change is that our accurate GIS data is going to be the foundation for everything we do for emergency alerts. And that will help us be successful in our emergency response. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor for any questions. And I don't know if any questions were.
Thanks, Kimberly. You know, we don't have any questions in the chat or the Q&A. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and input those in. I just say that's a powerful presentation of certainly not only the pre-planning and the response side of that, but I think as we begin this transition to next gen and we talk about the need for complete and accurate GIS data sets, one of those things we talk about is it's critically important to make sure that we have those data sets, again, complete and accurate. And something you said earlier, which resonated, is this is an ongoing effort, right? It's not a one and done. I think there's a perception that once you get the data developed and you get the data created, that you're good, and that you can kind of back away, and it's a low level of effort. But no, that's incredible. And I think going all the way back to one of your ending slide was that you mitigated that entire emergency, or I should say emergencies, right? Because you didn't have one incident to manage; you had multiple incidents to manage. But you did that, and you come out at the end of the day with no lives lost, no casualties, and that's a direct reflection, I think, on the leadership, the ability to be flexible, and to really approach that in a manner. So we got some questions coming in, and we'll take just a few here. And all right, Kimberly, first one from Rachel: Are there points within the proprietary emergency notification system itself versus address points maintained by your own organization? And can you discuss the difference between the two?
So I'm not quite sure I understand the question. So address points, they're all our data. So everything that is in the system is our data. The foundational map that we use is our data. And the address points that we geocode and the data that we put in the system is all our data. So it's owned and managed by LETA, and we're using our emergency notification provider to use the GIS tools, drawing the polygons and sending the alert. So hopefully that answers the question.
So I think clarification to that, Kimberly, is I think there's a perception, and Rachel, let me know if you think if I'm misspeaking to your question, but from a mass notification perspective, there's a lot of vendors out there that are providing that, right? So this is what I took away from the presentation was you didn't go out and purchase a solution from a vendor. This was something that was built from the ground up, developed by LETA. So the data that's supported within that system is your authoritative data set. Is that an accurate reflection?
Um, yes and no. So we have software as a solution through a vendor, and that is our emergency notification vendor. And then the data we put in the system, our geocoded data, our citizen data, is our 911 data that we geocode and put in the system. Citizens opt in and they put it in the system. We can extract it, use it, manipulate it. So all of that is our data. The only part that is vendor specific would be our portal to get in and then send the alerts for doing evacuations.
Great. So I think that's indicative of one of the challenges to consider, and again, vendor agnostic, not selling any specific tools. But one thing just to keep in mind to that point, not only is the GIS data that you're developing internally to LETA critically important to the overall success of the 911 system, of all those ancillary systems that are feeding off of that data, but being mindful that, and you were forthright in that thought process, that you want the ability to consume your data to make those decisions within that solution, and so maybe that's a takeaway. Make sure you have the ability to do that.
And that's an excellent point. When we moved over to the system we're on now, we did that in 2008, and that was a requirement. A requirement was if we're going to spend time using our data, we want a system that will allow us to put our data in it. And so in 2008, we didn't have that point-based address map. It was Centerline only. So it was a Centerline map. It was Centerline. It was their commercial geocoder. And again, we identified that wasn't good enough. And we were able to show our vendor, we have to be able to geocode it and upload it and do the point-based address mapping, and then geocode off of a point base. So that was all work we did by explaining to our provider that close isn't good enough. And so when you select an emergency notification system, if you're going to spend time and money and resources internally to develop your data, but then you're going to use just a Google map and a generic Centerline, you're really taking a step backwards.
Yeah, and you led me right to a question I had earlier. You were talking through the presentation, and you spoke a little bit about there was a point in time where you were reliant on open source data, and whether that's Google or Bing or anybody else that is really an open source data provider. Is it fair to say that that's, if you don't have data, that's a good place to start, but if you want to refine, and to your point, close isn't good enough, right? So we look at that from a notification perspective. Was that a driving? It sounds to me like that was a driving force. That was a good start, but you weren't able to rely on that to surely stand up to stakeholders in your community and say, I'm confident that if there's an emergency around you, I'm gonna be able to identify where you are and make sure we reach out to you and not
Yeah.
rely on anybody else to tell us who that is.
Right. And so in 2008, we were able to put our data in the system to see our data when we were sending emergency alerts, but it was still geocoding on a commercial geocoder. So we would take our 911 data, citizens would opt in, and that was all great, but they were being geocoded on a commercial geocoder using Centerline data. So it was close, but it wasn't exact. So when we had our events in 2012 with our fires, in 2013 with our floods, we truly were answering questions of why didn't I get called? I was in that polygon. I was in the evacuation area. Why didn't I get called? And when you started to peel away those layers, the answer was we geocoded them wrong. The system put them on a, again, county road, very long road. They were figuring out 500 was right in the center of a long road, and it really wasn't. So that Centerline geocoding commercial geocoder caused us to really say we have to do this better, and we got to find a better solution. And it wasn't leaving our emergency notification provider, it was how can we change our processes internally to make it better.
That's great. That's something for everybody to think about. And again, kudos to the entire LETA team and all the stakeholders that contributed to that to make those decisions ahead of time. Another question that came in, which I think is important, as we talk about whether it's mass notification, alerting systems, NG 911, or even today's legacy 911. What's your relationship like between your local government GIS and LETA?
Take a big sigh. We have 25 government partners, so I can't answer that without telling you there's some drama there. But as it relates to GIS, it's good, and so it's getting better every day. We hired, and our GIS analyst is on the phone at this meeting with us today, and he's worked really hard over the years to build bridges. And what happens right now is this amazing flow of information where the government partners, so again, 25 government partners, they provide us the data. Ben Butterfield is our GIS analyst, and he takes that data and he massages it into a 911 database, GIS database, and then we share it back out to our government partners. So they give us changes, additions, growth areas. He takes a look at it and he makes sure that it's 911 ready. So he gets it into what we need for 911 accuracy levels, and then we share it back out to our partners. So it really is about what are we trying to do, and public safety is our driving force. So as relates to 25 government partners and where we are now with all of our processes, it's excellent. Not without drama, because it's government agencies all trying to work together, but our data now, it drives the 911 system. It drives what we do for call routing, for developing our MSAG. We're getting prepared for spatial call routing, but it is also used in that computer-aided dispatch system. So we get it from the assessors, from those doing development in our communities, and it's being used for planning and preparing emergency response. So it is completely integrated throughout all of our partners.
Yeah, I think that stakeholder relationship, right? And I think non-traditional. So if you've ever attended one of our, one of Data Mark's presentations of Beyond the 98, we talk a lot about relationship building. We talk a lot about, not operating in silos, that you have these, and I'll say as a former 911 director, I was in my own silo. Everything was important to me, and whatever I had was most important to me. And it was the authoritative because I was the 911 guy, right? But breaking down those silos and reaching across the aisle and introducing yourself to GIS partners, to property appraisers, to tax collectors, to all these folks that contribute, and building relationships with them, and not just operating in this mindset that it's mine and you can't have it, right? But you can't have mine, but I want all of yours.
Yeah, and we have never operated that way. It has always been we are partners and we're stronger together, and we're stronger if we work together. So we build these bridges, and really how Colorado works 911 and how we are as the 911 authority, we're the only agency in our county that can reach across all government partners and pull everybody together. And so we take a lot of pride in being able to do that.
That's incredible. There's another question that came in, and I'm not sure the granularity that you can dive into this, but what is your 911 accuracy level percentage as it relates to your data?
Yeah, I wish I knew that number, but Ben does. And Ben's on our call, and I'm not sure. I think I see a Ben B. I don't know if that's him or not, but I think we would have to unmute him. I don't know if he can respond in chat or not, but we're going through that right now. Ben is constantly looking at that and taking a look at that accuracy of our data. So again, it is not a one in and one out. It is something that he looks at all the time, and he just replied and he said it's 99.99%. And we ran through our data through Datamark. We're working with another vendor on running our data through, so we're constantly trying to make it as accurate as possible. So again, close in my book is never going to be good enough. It has to be spot on.
Yeah. And Kimberly, one thing you hit on earlier, and really all around this conversation we just had was, about relationships and cohesive operations and building partners right around that. Um, and I think what you described earlier through that was this sense of, and we talk a little bit about this, especially from a regional or state level perspective. Build it once and use it many, right? Build a data set and get an overarching data set that can support other systems. You mentioned CAD. You mentioned certainly we just talked about the alerting system. All the other systems, and that's something that we've done a better job at over the years as an industry is recognizing that we don't have to maintain all these different data sets. You
Right.
can use one data set and then peel off what you need for different business functions, and schema requirements are different, but we've got some just incredibly talented GIS professionals. And I look through the attendee list. There's a lot of names in here that I'm familiar with. So, and I've worked with some that are just monumental in driving the industry. And it's incredible what LETA has done, under your leadership and the hard work that Ben and folks have had the opportunity to have conversations with both of you offline, and just congratulations for what you did. Thank you for that. And I'll say, as one of our commenters posted in the chat, we have staff that live and work in your area and in and around you. And thank you for what you do every day, because we need, candidly, the staff that we have in Colorado. I can't do my job without them. So thank you for taking care of them, making sure they're taken care of, and certainly the visitors and everybody else that that are in the leader response area. We appreciate the work you're doing, leading by example, driving the industry, and challenging the norm. I think is a good way to say that as well.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for taking the time to sit through my presentation today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for coming. We're just about 10 minutes to the top of the hour. I do want to take just one final opportunity and thank Day Wireless, who's our sponsor for this session today. Aside from the presenters, of the caliber that we've had this week, it's been a great week. Thank our vendors for the support and preparing everything and making sure we have the resources needed to put this event together for you. And I'd be remiss if I did not take an opportunity to thank each and every public safety telecommunicator on the call today, serving with us this week. This is your week. We appreciate what you do, no matter where you're at, no matter how long you've been in the business. We appreciate it, especially during this time of this global pandemic that we're hopefully coming on the downhill slide of that. But you truly are the unsung heroes who served everybody during this time, and we could not do the things we do without y'all. We appreciate it. Hope you have a great week. Several more sessions coming throughout the day. I have the distinct pleasure, speaking along the global pandemic. I'll be moderating a session this afternoon with Brian McMurdo on adversity and overcoming adversity. There's not a better time now to talk about adversity. So I invite everybody, if you can, please join us for that session as well. Brian will speak from firsthand experiences as a telecommunicator, and all the way through his other, additional professional roles. So you can see us there. And again, the closing session this afternoon, I'll also be moderating that session. I invite everybody to join that. We have an enormous amount of giveaways to share with everybody, and then certainly the competition per se that we have going on is which PSAP here is going to receive 24 hours of catering for your staff. So join us this afternoon. Hope everybody has a great day. Thanks for your time, and everybody be well.
Great. Thank you.